Well, good morning again. It's wonderful to see you all fast becoming old friends. It hasn't been very long in time in this incarnation, but somehow there is a kinship among all of us, and having all gathered on Lahiri Mahashaya's birthday. If you are new to the avatars, the gurus here, this is Babaji, who I think is familiar to everyone, thanks to Rajnikant. His disciple, Lahiri Mahashaya of Benares. Lahiri Mahashaya's disciple, Sri Yukteswar of Serampore outside Calcutta. And of course, Yoganandaji, our great guru. And all of this has come to us through his direct disciple, Swami Kriyananda. Now, Babaji has said, as written in the autobiography of a yogi, that he and Christ, Jesus Christ I should say, together have brought this message back to the world. Babaji in form, he is still living in Badri Narayanan somewhere, and Christ not in form. Babaji also said that he was an incarnation of Krishna, and so there Krishna is in the back here. Normally on the altar that Yogananda gave in the West, he didn't have Krishna in the back, because Babaji, as a reincarnation of Krishna, as Babaji said, is Babaji and Krishna together. But in India it's a little hard to have Jesus in the center of the altar with no Krishna, with no explanation. So Swamiji for India has added this, and it's a beautiful painting. So today, or tomorrow, is Lahiri Mahashaya's birthday, and on Thursday, the 26th, was the date of his Mahasamadhi. And so we thought it would be nice to talk a little bit about the life and impact of this great avatar. It's important to remember that each of these four are avatars, meaning they descended, that's what avatar means, descent. They descended to earth completely free. They were not impelled to reincarnate like all of us. They were not impelled to reincarnate like ordinary saints, though any saint is a great saint. But when you first become free, you attain Nirvikalpa Samadhi, like we did in that chant. You become what is called a Jivan Mukta, freed while living. And it may seem like, well, that's nice to know about saints, levels of bachelors and masters, postgraduate and all that. It's not theoretical. Yoganandaji said everyone drawn to this path should strive to become a Jivan Mukta, the first stage of liberation, in this lifetime. And he said that because it's possible. We have to keep that thought in mind. It is possible. And then someone pointed out that he actually said everyone should strive to become at least a Jivan Mukta in this lifetime. From the state of Jivan Mukta, you cannot fall. You will reincarnate, but only to work out karma from past lives, and you will not create any new karma. So, almost all the great saints in the autobiography of a yogi were Jivan Muktas. Anandamoyi Ma, the levitating saint, and basically almost all of them were Jivan Muktas. So, if you know the life of Anandamoyi Ma, you know what a great saint she was. So Jivan Mukta is no small thing, obviously. Having said that, the next stage of sainthood is when we work out all of our past karma as well, by seeing that God acted through us in this dream. And when all of that karma is released, then we become what is called a Param Mukta, which means, of course, beyond that freedom, that first stage. At that point, if such a soul returns to earth, then he or she is called an avatar, and coming to earth for a specific purpose, which of course the most famous avatar is that we know of is Krishna, saying, when virtue declines and vice predominates, I incarnate on earth to uphold virtue and to destroy evil. And that phrase we use all the time, but that is saying, he is saying, I descend, I return as an avatar. So each of these masters was an avatar, according to Yoganandaji and according to their own words. And so there's great power behind each one of them. To have even one guru as an avatar is a tremendous thing. And here there are 4, and then 5 if you count Jesus. So in the autobiography, but at the same time, there's one disadvantage of having 5 avatars, is then you have to get to know 5 avatars. And I mean, I'm starting to understand Yogananda. I saw Swamiji, and then, okay, Yoganandaji writes so much about his guru, and then Lahiri Mahashaya sometimes is shrouded in mystery unnecessarily. Of course, we know of Babaji and his greatness, and Lahiri Mahashaya sometimes can get missed. I know for myself, I had a harder time tuning into him at first, because Master writes so reverently of his own guru, and of course Babaji is so dramatic as a Mahavatar, the avatar that helps the other avatars. He's like the avatar boss. And he's still living in Badrinath, so I mean that gets the attention. And yet Lahiri Mahashaya is really behind everything, so many things that we know. Yoganandaji originally titled his book, Autobiography of a Yogi, as Yogi Christs of India. And you can imagine the impact such a title would have had in America with such a strong Christian background, that here are the Yogi Christs from India. So whether someone talked him out of it or whether he changed his mind, it became Autobiography of a Yogi. But the point is, of that original title, he was writing about the saints of modern India and showing their greatness and India's greatness. And so it's important to remember some of those saints are so memorable, like Ram Gopal Mujumdar, the sleepless saint who meditated for 40 years in one cave and then shifted to meditate another 20 years in another cave. And when Master met him, he was so uplifted. He also was a Paramukta, Yoganandaji said. And he was a disciple of Lahiri Mahashaya. Swami Pranabhananda makes such a dramatic impression too, the saint with 2 bodies. Yoganandaji goes to meet him, and the saint, without even reading the letter that Yoganandaji has for him, says, I will fetch the man you're seeking. And then he meditates. And Yogananda, as a young boy, is sort of, how shall we proceed, sir? But he's just meditating. Meanwhile, the man comes up the stairs saying that Swami Pranabhananda had met him at the Ghat and had led him back to his house. And then they got into an argument at first. He's sitting here. He was at the Ghat. No, he was sitting here. Ghat's here. And then Swami Pranabhananda said, why be surprised at such a miracle? If we have control over the cosmic law, we can manifest another body if needed. But Master said he was a little bit intimidated by this display, and he looked at Swami Pranabhananda wondering if it was him or his double that he was looking at. Swami Pranabhananda, disciple of Lahiri Mahashaya, also a Paramukta, Master said. Swami Kebalananda, Swami Keshabananda, so many of these saints, and of course the greatest of Lahiri Mahashaya's disciples, Swami Sri Yukteswar, all disciples of Lahiri Mahashaya. So in other words, so many of these saints that we read about with their inspiring stories, he was their guru. So in one way that helps us understand what must be the guru's greatness. Another thing is the autobiography of a yogi itself, through which we know any of this, was predicted by Lahiri Mahashaya. His disciples were desperate to spread his name. And he said no. As Master said, he prohibited all his disciples to write about him, but he predicted that someone would come. And so he said in, is it 1895? I think it was in 1895, right at the time of his death. Yes, 1895. He said, after my death, 50 years after my death, a book will come out about my life and about Kriya Yoga. And Master finished writing Autobiography of a Yogi in 1945, 50 years later. So even the Autobiography of a Yogi that we hold was sanctioned by him, because he didn't let anyone else write anything. So you see how intertwined his life and blessings are with our lives. Now, he also brought the science of Kriya Yoga. And I wanted to talk a little bit about his life and about how that came to pass. So his given name when he was born was Shyam Charan Lahiri. He was, of course, I said he was from Benares, but he was a Bengali, and he was born in the Krishnagar section of Bengal. And they had a large family estate. It was an ancient family with a long Brahmin tradition, but long spiritual history. And even when he was 4 or 5 years old, he would be seen meditating. He would bury his body beneath the sand just so the head was above it, and he would meditate for long hours. So I don't know how many of you as children did that, or how many of your children do that. I certainly did not do that. At the same time, we can see, okay, he was clearly a reincarnated yogi. And sometimes we can think, what a great soul, and he is. And that his yogic samskars were so strong that even at 4 and 5 he was in the lotus posture in the sand meditating. And that's true. And yet we have to remember that we too are reincarnated yogis. Master said you have to be, even to be attracted to this path. And then I would add, even to stick around for a little while, you would have had to have been a yogi. Because you're interested. We are interested. There's so many other things to be interested in this world. And yet, somehow, with the AC or without the AC, sorry, the power keeps going off and on, we come. We are hungry. And that hunger, that fire has been nurtured incarnation after incarnation. In the beginning, we have a little spiritual teaching we enjoy, and then we go back to our lives. So when we're taking up meditation as a serious practice, just like Lahiri Mahashaya, we are doing it for the nth time, where n is large. So, the next thing that happened, what happened to their home and forced them to leave Bengal, is that the Jalangi River changed its course, perhaps during a monsoon or something, and suddenly rushed into the Ganges and flooded this whole area and washed away their house. Lahiri was born in 1828, so this was some time after that. So the family relocated to Benares. Now Lahiri Mahashaya, at the age of 23, became, and this is the best part, a government accountant. That was his job. Our avatar was a government accountant. And so that also should encourage us, lest we think, well, but I am an IT professional. Excellent. He was a government accountant. You see? It's such a mundane thing in a way, you could say, such a normal thing. And that tells us that we can't judge divinity, and we can't judge even our soul by the outward job that we have. He was working for the military engineering department of the British government. This was in 1851 at this point now. And so he then, 10 years into his career, in 1861, at the age of 33, he was transferred, because he had moved all around, of course, as government jobs and military jobs. He lived in all different parts of India. He was transferred to Raniket. They were opening a new office there, and Lahiri is needed, send him to Raniket. So he went to Raniket. And he said my office duties were not overly taxing, and so I got to spend many hours roaming in the woods and hills around Dronagiri Mountain in Raniket. And I say all this because you too can go to Dronagiri Mountain and go and follow in his footsteps of what I'm about to tell you. He was walking one day and he heard a voice calling his name, Lahiri. Or perhaps it was Shamacharan, I don't know. It must have been Lahiri, because Babaji always referred to him as Lahiri. So he was confused, and so he went further and further in the direction of the voice, higher up the mountain, concerned because it was getting dark, would he even be able to return? And then he met this young saint, who was a little bit startling because he looked he said, like a younger version of myself. And the saint said, "Welcome. I see my telegram had its effect." And Lahiri Mahashaya was confused, and he said, "Sir, I have to get back to my office." And the saint, who was speaking Hindi to him, switched to English and said, "The office was brought for you, and not you for the office." And Lahiri thought, here he is quoting the words of Christ from the Bible, basically, in English. Who is this saint? And he brought him into a cave, and we can go to this cave. And next year, around this time, we will go to the cave. Anyone who wants to go. And he said, "Lahiri, as Master put it, don't you know me? Don't you know this place?" And Lahiri Mahashaya said, "No, there was 2 blankets there. There were a few bowls, begging bowls there." He said, I've never been here before. And then the young saint tapped him on the chest, and suddenly everything came back to him. He remembered. He said, "This is the cave of my last incarnation, where I spent many years meditating with you, my guru, Babaji. This is the blanket where I had so many realizations." And he was so in love at this reunion. And Babaji said, "All these years I have kept the blanket clean. I have kept the bowl clean. I watched you as you went from your past life into this life. I saw you meditating under the sands as a little boy. And I waited these 33 years before calling you back." And as Master puts it, what love there is. What kind of love can we even say compared to that of the Guru for his disciple? So, Lahiri Mahashaya was then initiated into Kriya Yoga in a golden palace, which was manifested in the Himalayas. It's an incredible story. I encourage you to reread it in the autobiography of a yogi. And then he came to what would be the natural thought of all of us, saying, "Well, Guruji, this is great. I'm glad we're back together, and let's get on with it, basically. Where shall we go next? Please, can I join your secret band?" Which, he noted, included 2 spiritually advanced Americans, which, speaking as an American citizen, I was relieved, because you think, no, there couldn't be any Americans in that club. But no, there apparently are, with Babaji, some Americans. I'm sure many from many countries, but I'm sure a lot of Indians especially. So, he said, "Can I stay with you?" And Babaji said, "No." He said, "A deep purpose underlay the fact that I didn't meet you until your 33rd year, when you were already married, with children, and with job responsibilities." He said, "You must take this Kriya back to the world. Being in the world, you must yet not be of it." Again, that's something we have to take to heart. Master used to say it all the time. Be in the world, but not of it. Be of God. Say, I'm doing this duty, I'm playing out this incarnation, but the masters are with me. I'm following in their footsteps to get out of this whole mess. And I may not stand on a street corner and say, "Be a yogi," to everyone, makes me laugh. At one point we had a yoga teacher training course in Ananda village, and there were a lot of newcomers, Americans of course, coming from outside all these teachings and then saying, yeah, I want to be a yoga teacher, so okay, teach me this and teach me the breathing and the anatomy and all these things. Okay, this is great. And one evening the yoga instructor Gyandev decided to put on told some stories from the Mahabharata and read from the Bhagavad Gita, and his wife Diksha did a dance because she was also trained, though not an Indian, she was trained in some Indian classical dance. And so he was reading this Gita to these people, and they of course are all learning to be yoga teachers, and then he says Krishna's words, "Be thou, O Arjuna, a yogi." And this woman turned to me and said, "It doesn't really say that, does it?" I mean, he's just saying that to us because we're learning yoga, right? It doesn't mean, no. And I said, yes, actually, yes. It's much more than even asana. But it was fun. So, going back to this now. Lahiri came back to Benares. He had been with Babaji. Wouldn't we love to be with Babaji? He had received Kriya, initiation. He was, of course, many of you have received and many of you are keen to receive and are working on receiving that sacred technique. And he came back to the world. And he was a government accountant for 25 more years. 25 years after meeting Babaji, he was still working in that office. He received many promotions and all these things, but just to say, he fulfilled his duties. So lest we ever feel trapped by circumstance or feel like I'm just wasting in my life sitting in this chair, clacking at this keyboard or whatever. Think of Lahiri Mahashaya in the Himalayas, in this golden palace, and then spending 25 more years at a desk. In other words, that was no constraint on the bliss that he felt. That was no limitation. And that was actually a role he was playing so that one day we could all say that he worked for 25 more years. To give us all hope and encouragement. Because a householder saint, a householder avatar, is so needed in these times for two reasons. The first reason is that often we think, well, the really spiritual people are the monastics. Those who are monks, nuns, they who have been able to renounce everything and just spend their time in meditation. And oh, wouldn't that be nice? We could just be free of all things. Suddenly no more alarm clocks, no more ITRs, tax returns, no more PAN card. I just can meditate under the tree at my guru's feet and have a peaceful life. Why do we yearn for that? If you don't yearn for that, then never mind. But why would we yearn for that? Why? Because we must have done it before. And we must have enjoyed it. Why else would we be interested? You meet a random person in America and say, hey, do you want to live in a mountain cave and basically close your eyes and meditate a lot? Actually, more and more people might say yes. But, even 50 years ago, what are you talking about? It's cold in the caves. And that actually happens to the renunciates. Yoganandaji said he went to the Himalayas trying to find some spiritually uplifted souls, and he did find some. But he said most of them were just fighting over the blankets and things. It's too cold, and wondering what's for dinner, and so on. So in other words, there's no need to transport the body if the mind is still here. So one reason is we need to see a householder saint to prove that a householder's outward activities are no limitation on the elevated saintly stature that we can achieve. And to break that bias or prejudice, you can say. The other reason is that in this world we are living in a higher age now. There are more everyday people, common people, meaning living common lives, who are nevertheless desperately desirous of God. In older times, in the darker ages, in Kali Yuga, it was not the case. If you wanted to lift your mind up, you had to go to the mountains because it was the only place you could be free of all of the chaos and heavy energy of the Kali Yuga. I mean, even in the U.S., they were talking about, people having their yearly bath and things like that. I mean, you can just imagine what life would be like with a yearly bath. And it tends to draw the mind down, I would imagine. So it's time to go to the caves. That's the only sane place. That's not true anymore. We are all here seeking God, and therefore there is a need. The masters have many more customers now, meaning all of us. And so that's why Lahiri Mahashaya also came as an avatar householder. I have a wife, I have 2 children, and I am an avatar. I'm an incarnation of God. In fact, Master called him the Yoga Avatar, incarnation of yoga. He said Lahiri Mahashaya's greatest miracle was reducing the complexities and the esoteric science and techniques of yoga into the Kriya Yoga technique. Yes, it's true, Babaji initiated him into Kriya Yoga and gave him that blessing and that technique. But Lahiri Mahashaya clarified the technique. He separated it into 4 initiations, which may be news to some of you, because when we say prepare yourself for Kriya initiation, actually we mean the first Kriya. And there are actually 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Kriya after that. That takes time, and the first Kriya is sufficient, but there are higher initiations. And that was organized by Lahiri Mahashaya according to his divine intuition. And lest you think, well, gosh, I'm working towards the first Kriya, but let's get that out of the way and let's get on to the second Kriya. There was a disciple of Lahiri Mahashaya said to him, Master, I am ready for the second Kriya. I know you haven't given it, but I am ready. And at that moment, one of Lahiri Mahashaya's other disciples, a postman named Brinda, came up to him. And Lahiri said, as Master tells in one of his talk tapes, Brinda, don't you want the second initiation? Master, no. Don't you want the second Kriya? Master, no. He said, already I have come to you today to ask you to bless me, because from the first Kriya I am feeling so much bliss I can't even deliver my letters. And I don't want to lose my job. So bless me that I can actually function with all this bliss. And so the other disciple said, well, I see I have been a poor workman blaming my tools. And so that is what we want. We can be free even with Hong Sa. You can find God, which is important too. Lest you have only learned Hong Sa and think, gosh, this is like nothing. It is plenty. And so now we come to Lahiri Mahashaya spreading this Kriya. Meanwhile, he went up a sleeping saint. In other words, he was not reawakened. He went up, he met Babaji up by Ranikhet. He came back down to the office, and a telegram came saying, Lahiri was transferred by mistake, send him back. Somebody else was supposed to have gone to Ranikhet. That was the meaning of Babaji's telegram. He made the little switch so that Lahiri could come to him. So now he's back at his desk in the military engineering department of the British government. But obviously there is a change, and his superior, who was a Britishman, started calling him Ecstatic Babu. That was the nickname he gave for Lahiri. My ecstatic Babu, meaning in ecstasy, divine ecstasy. And so the first sort of miracle that became obvious around Lahiri Mahashaya was one day his boss came in rather concerned and troubled, and Lahiri said, "What's the matter, sir?" And he said, I just received word my wife is very ill. And so Lahiri said, "I will get you some word about her." And so he went back into a little closet somewhere and sat down for a while. Then he came back and said, "Your wife is improving. In fact, right now she's writing you a letter." And then he quoted some sentences from the letter. And the boss said, "Well, I know you're a great soul, but I mean, come on." And so then when the letter arrived, it indeed said the wife was improving, and it included those same exact sentences. And then when the wife later visited India, when she saw Lahiri Mahashaya at his desk, she said, "Sir, it was you who came to me in my sickbed and brought this from the light from your presence. I was instantly healed." And so in this way, miracles started to crop up around Lahiri Mahashaya. But he was very quiet, and he would not let anyone basically make a big thing of him. His disciples wanted to name him Kashi Baba Maharaj and have him, his fame spread out throughout Benares. And he said, no, let the fragrance of Kriya waft naturally. And so, but more and more seekers came. One seeker, I think his name was Panchanan Bhattacharya, he had a boss who said, "I don't want religious fanatics working for me. What are you doing always going to this saint's house? Saint." In a way, it kind of reminds you of Master's own father. That's how he became a disciple of Lahiri Mahashaya. When his own employee said, "I have to go to see him," and he said, "No. Concentrate on office work if you want to get ahead." Meanwhile, Lahiri Mahashaya materializes in the wheat field and says, "Bhagavati, you are too hard on your employee." And Bhagavati, just imagine. He says, "I give you leave and I give myself leave. Let's go to Benares and meet this guru." And he became his disciple. Similarly, this other disciple, let's say it's Mr. Bhattacharya, though I'm not sure, his boss said to him, "If I ever meet that guru of yours, I will give him a piece of my mind," essentially. And nevertheless, the employee kept going to the guru. And one day, his boss, just in fury, followed him and then burst in onto the gathering of about 11 disciples that were there. And right as he walked in, Lahiri Mahashaya said, "Would you like to see a picture?" And the disciples, "Yes, Master." And so he said, "Sit in a circle, one behind the other. Take your hands and cover the eyes of the one in front of you." So they did, including the boss, reluctantly, but he did it too. And then he said, "Tell me what you see." And the disciple said, "I see a beautiful woman wearing a red bordered sari." And the next man said, "I see the same thing." And each one of the 12 said that's what they saw. And then he turned to the boss, this angry boss man, and said to him, "Do you know this woman?" And the boss said, "Yes. I have been wasting a lot of money on her, though I have a good wife at home." He said, "I'm ashamed of myself and my wickedness. Please, Guruji, accept me as your disciple." And so it's I can't help but tell the rest of the story. He said, "Initiate me into Kriya Yoga." And Lahiri said, "I will, if you live in an upright manner, in a pure manner for 6 months." And then he said, "If you don't, then I won't have to." And so the man, missing any implication in this message, for 3 months was very good, and then after 3 months went back to his former habits, and 2 months later he passed away. And so Lahiri was predicting that too also. So his tenderness towards his disciples was, Lahiri Mahashaya was very tender. In other words, we know how stern Sri Yukteswar was. But Lahiri was very gentle, calm, peaceful. In fact, Swamiji said in a talk on Lahiri Mahashaya's birthday that really Master approached God through devotion and through Divine Mother. Sri Yukteswar, of course, through wisdom, just unfeeling truth. This is the law, this is what's right, Purim. And he said Lahiri's experience of God was of great peace, and that he was that peace itself. And when we meditate, we should meditate with the thought, "I am this peace that I seek. I have this peace already. I'm not meditating, as Swamiji once said, like, okay, let's have some peace. I don't know when I'm ever going to get any peace. We have to be peaceful. We have to affirm the peace as we are meditating and to be filled up more. Now we know this because when we meditate, we feel peaceful, and often we have the experience, but this is who I really am. This is how I've always been. This is more familiar to me than my restless state that I spend most of the time in. And again, speaking personally. But that peace feels so much more natural. And sometimes if you look in the mirror after a good meditation, you go, oh, there's the face that I've been looking for all this time. It's not, what we see half the time in the mirror. I look like myself, finally. And so that peace, Lahiri Mahashaya's quality of peace. One disciple was trying to get from Calcutta to Benares to see her guru, Lahiri Mahashaya, and they got delayed in traffic, and they reached the Howrah station just as the Benares train was blowing its whistle and starting to depart. And she prayed desperately, Guruji, I must see you. And so the train, though its wheels were spinning, was not moving. And so the engineer got out and was looking at this, and then the passengers got out and also thought, what is happening? And a British official, as Master said, contrary to all precedent, came up to this Indian couple and said, there's probably time for you to board the train here. Give me the money, I'll buy you the tickets, I'll show you where you can come onto the train. And as soon as they boarded the train and were seated, the train started to move. And of course then everybody had to scramble to get back onto the moving train. And then when they reached Benares, Lahiri Mahashaya said, Abhoya, how you love to trouble me, as if you couldn't have waited for the next train. And yet he held it for her. And let us remember that the gurus, they love it when we pester them. As one devotee in Bangalore used to say, I tug at the edge of his hair. I never let go to get his attention. Sir, don't forget me. Don't forget me. Master said to one of his disciples, I lost sight of you for a few incarnations. I will never lose sight of you again. And that disciple from time to time would say, Master, remember your promise. And Krishna says the same. That basically of his devotee, he never loses sight of me, nor I lose sight of him. And so we should pray to the gurus, pray to our guru, pray to saints, say, intercede in my life. Not just save my life. As Swamiji said, sometimes you expect God to save your life just because he wants to get some more work out of you, so he has to keep you around. But it's in the trivial things when our prayers are answered sometimes that are so much sweeter. So jumping ahead, Lahiri Mahashaya, another thing to mention, if you have at all read Swamiji's Essence of the Bhagavad Gita, which is really, of course, Yoganandaji's commentaries on the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, that whole concept of the Gita and of its symbology of the warriors representing the inner conflict, the Kauravas being our evil tendencies, the Pandavas being our good tendencies. Though it was a historical battle, true, it also is a deep spiritual allegory of this war within ourselves. That was given to him by Sri Yukteswar, but that was given first by Lahiri Mahashaya. And so even that Gita that we read, that original exposition is from Lahiri Mahashaya. In other words, to say how intimately connected it is with what we're doing here. So just to finish, his wife one day had this dream that, this was after Lahiri Mahashaya met Babaji, that she saw her husband floating, saw her husband meditating in the center of the room, and all these angels were coming and bowing at him, at his feet, or bowing at his feet. And she woke up, and she saw he was levitating in the center of the room, and he was surrounded by all these lights. And she said, "I must still be dreaming." And he said, "You are not dreaming. Awake from your sleep of delusion." And she realized what soul she had married, and she said, "Please accept me as your disciple and forgive all my sinfulness in the sense of not recognizing you before now," and so on. And she became his disciple and was initiated into Kriya Yoga and was a great saint. And yet, there's a fun, sweet story she confessed to Yoganandaji when he went back and met her in 1935. He said, no, maybe not 1935, maybe when he was younger. She said that after a certain time, she became, some years maybe, she suddenly became seized by delusion, as she put it. And she became jealous of all the time that Lahiri would spend with the disciples. And she said, "You spend all the time in the parlor with the disciples and don't think of the needs of your own family. I am sorry that you don't care to earn more money to help your sons and wife." And Lahiri looked at her and then just vanished. And she said, "No, I'm sorry. And he said, "Don't you see it is all nothing?" She heard his voice, though she couldn't see him. He said, "How could a nothing like me produce riches for you?" And she said, "Guruji, forgive me. I'm so sorry. Please come back." And so he appeared again, once again floating and then descending back to earth. And then he said, gently, "One of my chelas will provide for you." And it turned out one of them ended up providing for the family after some time. But just to say, I say that story partly because we have those experiences too. We feel completely free. We feel completely uplifted. We say, "Gosh, from now on, I will always be kind because I feel this peace in my heart in meditation, and it's natural. Why would I ever be unkind?" And then someone says, "We had to cancel your appointment and sorry we didn't call you." "What? I mean, at least do me the courtesy." Where did it all come from? I was in the peace. I was having the peace. Where did this come? So that's just the ego trying to assert itself. We have to be disciplined, and then also we have to just laugh at it. Meaning, don't take it too heavily. Because if we go, "Oh, I'm so horrible," then the ego says, "That's right." We just say, "Stop it." And again, Lahiri Mahashaya's own saintly wife, she said, was seized by delusion just in that moment. And of course, forgiven. So just to bring you to the end of Lahiri Mahashaya's beautiful life, there's the beautiful story of how Babaji said, "I'm about to leave this body," and it's a wonderful story, but I'm running out of time now. But he didn't leave the body, and then he did say to the disciple who was present, "Tell Lahiri that the stored up life force in his body is almost finished." And so the disciple returned to Lahiri and told him that without realizing what it meant. And Lahiri suddenly became rigid and for 3 hours was ashen, lifeless, which he would do all the time. He stayed in that parlor all the time, and he rarely slept. In fact, his wife made the comment that after she became his disciple, they never slept in the same room. And she said, in fact, he never slept at all, again. And so there's a strange little story about that parlor, though, I don't know, it came through Yoganandaji's brother that there was a cat that Lahiri kept. And one point the cat came near his food when he was eating, and he sort of brushed it aside without touching it, but the cat went flying and it hit a wall and was sort of unconscious, and he very sadly went over and touched the cat, and the cat came back and was fine. So, I mean, anyway, God has a good sense of humor. So, finally to end, Lahiri Mahashaya said to his disciples after a beautiful discourse on the Bhagavad Gita in Benares, he said, "I am going home." And they all cried out naturally. And he said, "Don't worry, I will resurrect myself." and then he turned his body in a circle 3 times, faced north, and left the body, had his Mahasamadhi. And then at 10 a.m. the next morning, one of the disciples who had been there in Benares had Lahiri materialize in his home. And just as when Sri Yukteswar did, and just as when Christ did, he touched his body and it was warm and alive, and it was not a vision. Another disciple who was in a far-off city had this same experience, also at 10 o'clock. And yet another disciple, Swami Keshavananda from Haridwar, was trying to get to Calcutta, to Benares, because he received a telegram, come urgently. And he couldn't make the train, and then Lahiri showed up and he said, "How? You're here?" And he said, "Why come to Benares? You will find me there no more." And Keshavananda wept. And Lahiri said, "Why do you weep? I mean, I died and I'm right here. What's the problem?" basically. And actually, the reason I mention that too is some of Lahiri Mahashaya's ashes of his body, because it was cremated, are at this ashram in Haridwar, Keshavananda's ashram. So, the last thing I'll say is that one disciple lamented during Lahiri's lifetime that he lived so far away and he couldn't go see him as much as he wanted. And we can feel that we didn't get to live in Benares, perhaps. We haven't gotten to go to the Himalayas to find Babaji. We haven't been with Sri Yukteswar in his ashram, as Master described so vividly. We weren't with Master, and we saw Swamiji maybe once, maybe twice, maybe no times. It seems kind of like a short, what's the phrase? Short end of the stick, And yet, to this disciple having the same complaint, Lahiri Mahashaya said, "Why do you want to travel to Benares to view my bones when I am forever within the sight of your kutastha, your spiritual eye, your spiritual sight?" And so that's what we have to keep in mind, that no matter how separate we feel, the Masters are just one breath away, one meditation away. And if we can't see them, you can bet that they are seeing us. Master said, "To those who think me near, I will be near." So let us keep the Masters in our hearts every day throughout all our activities, and also say, just like Lahiri Mahashaya, "Free me, let me be free, just as you are free."